Before we start, make sure we don't lose you in the dark. Subscribe, like this video, and leave a comment to show you are here. I've driven almost every highway west of the Mississippi, but nothing ever rattled me like that night on Route 666. Some folks call it the Devil's Highway. Others think it's just a nickname left over from when the route number spooked people into demanding a change. But those who've actually driven it during the deep hours of night, especially between Gallup and Shiprock, know there's something wrong with that stretch. I never believed any of it. I thought it was just truck stop talk meant to mess with rookies. I was hauling a load of HVAC equipment out of Phoenix headed to Farmington, New Mexico. Usual timing, left late to beat the heat and planned to roll through the night. My dispatcher gave me the option to reroute through I-40 and cut north, but I figured Route 666 would save me time. I'd run it before without issue, though always during the day. This time I'd be pushing through it well past midnight. The first thing that felt off was the silence. Normally the CB chatter never really stops, even in the dead hours. Drivers calling out way stations, letting each other know about brake checks or patrol cars. But I hadn't heard a single voice since I passed Gallup. Static wasn't uncommon, but this was more like nothing, just dead air. My music started skipping and I blamed it on my old Bluetooth rig acting up again. Then the lane lines started to look strange. I don't mean swerving or fading. I mean they didn't reflect light the way they should have. It was like the paint was swallowing my headlights instead of bouncing them back. The asphalt looked darker than it should have been, even under high beams. And I started feeling like I was driving through a tunnel with no walls. Around 1:17 a.m., I saw taillights up ahead, faint at first, then clearer. A semi, maybe half a mile ahead, running without marker lights. That's a red flag out here. Could be someone hauling dirty or just a lazy driver, but either way I decided to hang back and give them room. As I crept closer, I realized their trailer was matte black. No decals, no numbers, no company markings. I flipped on my brights to get a better look, but the lights didn't hit it right. They just seemed to die against the surface like the whole thing was absorbing them. Then I noticed there was no license plate. Not even a mount for one. My gut told me to pass, so I dropped a gear and swung into the left lane. As I drew up beside it, I glanced over at the cab to give the driver a wave or at least a nod. But the windows were pitch black, not tinted, just void, like staring into an empty frame. I saw no silhouette, no movement, not even the glow of dash lights. I sped up. I don't usually push past the limit on open roads, but something about being alongside that truck made my skin crawl. I got ahead of it and checked my mirrors. Nothing. Just empty highway stretching behind me. The rig had vanished. I stared into my mirrors longer than I should have, half expecting to see headlights come roaring up behind me. But there was nothing. Just darkness and the faded shimmer of heat rising off the road, even though the night air had turned cold enough to fog the inside of my windshield. I radioed out on all open channels, asking if anyone else had eyes on the black rig, but the CB was still dead. No static, no signal. Just that hollow silence that presses on your ears like you're underwater. I tried turning the dial back and forth, but it was like the antenna wasn't even connected. My chest felt tight. Not panic, not yet, just the weight of something being wrong in a way I couldn't name. I flicked the dome light on and checked the dash. All systems green, voltage normal, no alerts. But when I looked back up, my headlights dimmed for half a second, and in that exact flicker, I saw the black rig again, this time in my mirror, riding maybe 3 truck lengths behind me. I hadn't heard it catch up. No engine growl, no road vibration. Just there 1 second, gone the next, and now back again. I tapped the brakes gently to see if it would respond. No change, no slowing. I switched lanes. It stayed centered behind me like it was glued to my trailer's shadow. I told myself it was a prank. Maybe another driver playing with night optics or running blackout mode for kicks. But deep down I didn't believe that. Nobody messes around like that out here. It's dangerous. Stupid. The kind of stunt that gets you blacklisted from loads, if not worse. I watched as its headlights began to flicker. Not randomly, but with rhythm, like a pulse. One long, too short, one long, too short, over and over. I didn't know Morse code, but the pattern felt intentional. Like a signal I wasn't meant to understand. I sped up again. Not flooring it, but pushing the needle enough to break the monotony of the road. The truck followed. No gain. No loss. It never drifted, never corrected, just hovered behind me with impossible precision. Then my trailer light started to flicker in response. I watched the reflection in my mirrors as my own rig answered back with the same pattern. One long, too short. Over and over. I pulled the wheel hard to the shoulder and came to a full stop, tires kicking up dust and gravel. I threw the parking brake and stepped out, grabbing my flashlight, ready to confront whoever was inside that ghost truck. But when I turned around, the road was empty. No headlights, no engine noise, no sign anyone had ever been there. I walked 20 yards behind my trailer with the flashlight sweeping side to side and saw no skid marks, no heat shimmer, no taillight glow in the distance, just open road and cold wind. I was alone again. I climbed back into the cab and locked the doors, hands trembling as I sat in silence. I didn't start the engine right away. I just sat there listening. That's when I noticed the air inside the cab had gone still. Not quiet, dead. No hum of electronics, no creak of cooling metal. Even my watch had stopped ticking. I looked at the dash clock. 1:17 a.m., the same time I'd first seen the black rig. I checked my phone. Same. 1:17 a.m. Then the screen dimmed and reset on its own. No boot-up screen, just black. Then white. Then an image. Not an app, not a message. A photo. Grainy, old. A highway sign bent in half like it had been hit by something massive. The words, Route 6666, barely legible through the distortion, and under it something standing just off the shoulder, tall, thin, almost human but not quite. I blinked. The image disappeared. My phone restarted normally. The clock now said 2:02 a.m. I sat for a long time before I started the engine again, watching the road like it might try to shift beneath my tires. Nothing moved. No wind. No birds. Not even the occasional rattlesnake you'd expect out here. I finally pulled back onto the highway. But I drove slower this time. Not out of fear, but calculation. I scanned every mirror, every shadow on the shoulder, every mile marker. Everything felt wrong. I passed an old rest stop I didn't remember being on the map. The sign was sun-bleached and leaning, but the lights were on in the windows. That made no sense. I hadn't seen another vehicle in over an hour. No taillights. No oncoming headlights. Nothing but the black rig that kept appearing and disappearing like a ghost behind me, still. I pulled off. Something in me said I needed to stop there, like the road itself was pushing me toward it. I parked and killed the engine. The air smelled like burnt plastic and motor oil, too thick for a place that looked abandoned. Inside, the place was cleaner than it should have been. Tables still set, coffee still steaming in a pot behind the counter, but not a soul in sight. A truck stop diner frozen in time. I walked toward the register, called out, and got no answer. Then I saw the security monitor mounted in the corner. It was cycling through camera feeds, but every angle showed the same truck. Mine. Over and over, dozens of views of my own rig parked outside. No matter which camera it showed, the truck was always centered, always still. That wasn't right. I leaned in. One of the frames showed something else, barely visible behind the truck, like a figure crouched low near the trailer wheels. I blinked and the feed changed. The next frame was back to normal. I waited. The camera cycled again. The same view. But this time the figure was standing, closer to the cab, arms unnaturally long, face obscured by some kind of black smear, like the lens itself didn't want to process what it was seeing. I bolted out the door and circled around the truck with my flashlight out. Nothing. No one. The asphalt was cold and empty. I opened the cab, climbed in, and slammed the door. I locked it without thinking. My heart was beating like I'd just run a mile. I turned the key. The engine started, but the radio crackled to life on its own, speakers hissing with distorted voices. I recognized one of them. It was mine. A recording, maybe. Something I'd said on a delivery 6 months ago when I got caught in a dust storm near Flagstaff. It was repeating on a loop, the words skipping and cutting like a broken tape. Then it stopped, and another voice came through. Low. Male. Rough. You were supposed to stop back there. You passed her. I didn't know what that meant. I hadn't seen anyone. Not a hitchhiker, not a broken-down car. Nothing but endless asphalt and desert. I slammed the radio off, put the truck in gear, and got out of there. I drove faster now. Not careless, but I kept one eye on the mirrors the entire time. That black rig didn't come back for another 20 miles, but when it didn't just follow me. It pulled up beside me, paced me for a full minute. No driver visible, cab windows as dark as tar. Then, as if the road itself bent to allow it, the black rig vanished again into thin air. I should have pulled over again, called someone, maybe just taken a break and waited for daylight. But part of me knew this thing wasn't going to leave me alone. Not now. Not after it had followed me this far. I kept driving, but my hands wouldn't stop sweating and my eyes were glued to the mirrors. Around 3 a.m., I passed a stretch of highway that felt familiar. Too familiar. Looked just like the part I'd driven an hour ago. Same mile marker. Same billboard with a sun-faded ad for a law firm long out of business. I thought maybe I'd doubled back, but my GPS, which had finally rebooted, insisted I was heading east. Then the CB came alive again. Not with static. Not with a voice. With sound. A long, low horn blast like a semi bearing down on me from behind. I checked my mirrors. Nothing. Then I heard it again. Closer. Sharper. Like it was right on top of me. I gripped the wheel tighter and tried to breathe, but that sound kept playing. A horn that never belonged to my truck. I pulled off at the next exit and found myself in a rest area I didn't remember ever seeing before. It wasn't on the GPS. No name, no amenities. Just a cracked lot, a row of dead lights and a single payphone under a busted awning. I stopped, engine idling, and stepped outside. The second I did, everything went quiet again. The hum of the engine dulled. The air around me felt too still. I walked over to the payphone, more out of instinct than reason, picked up the receiver and heard a dial tone. Then a voice answered before I could even dial. You passed her. You always do. My throat tightened. I asked who it was. The voice didn't respond. Just heavy breathing and then a click. I turned back toward the truck and saw it. Not the black rig. Something smaller. a figure standing by my driver's door. I couldn't make out the face, but I could tell it was a woman. Thin, shoulders hunched, like she'd been standing out there a long time. She didn't move, didn't wave, didn't speak. I called out, asked if she was okay, but she just stared at me. Then as I stepped closer, she vanished. No sound, no shadow, just gone. I searched the area, checked around the trailer, under the chassis, even inside the cab. Nothing. It was like she was never there. I climbed back in and sat behind the wheel, hands shaking. The radio turned itself back on. This time I heard crying. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet sobbing like someone had been alone too long. Then the voice returned. Same one. She needed help. You didn't stop. You never stop. The radio went silent again. I sat in the dark, staring at my own reflection in the windshield, barely visible in the low light. And for the first time in a long time, I wondered if I had missed something. Maybe years ago. Maybe recently. Maybe too many times to count. The road felt different after that stop. Not physically. I was still on 2 lanes of cracked pavement winding through the desert. But the air had weight to it, like I was driving through something thick and invisible. I tried to push forward, eyes on the odometer, willing the miles to pass, but they didn't. I stayed locked at the same mileage for nearly 20 minutes. It was like the truck was moving, but the road wasn't. I passed the same cactus 3 times, same bent road sign, same shredded tire on the shoulder. The digital clock on the dash blinked and reset again. 1:17 a.m. Always 1:17 a.m. My phone had no service, no satellites, no compass reading, just an open map with a blinking dot that refused to move. And then, like it had been waiting for me to give up, the black rig appeared again. This time it wasn't behind me. It was ahead, parked sideways across both lanes, headlights dead, cab angled just enough to make it look like a barrier. I slowed to a crawl, reached for the CB, and of course it was silent. No answer, no backup. I brought the truck to a full stop and waited. The black rig didn't move, no engine, no sign of life. I opened my door and climbed down slowly, every instinct screaming that I was stepping into something I wasn't meant to understand. I walked toward it, boots crunching gravel, flashlight cutting across the cab. Still no driver, no plates, no identifying marks. The metal absorbed light like it had no surface at all. I reached for the door handle. It opened on its own. Inside, the cab was dark, colder than it should have been. I leaned in and saw nothing but an empty seat, worn and sun-cracked like it hadn't been used in decades. On the dashboard, something lay folded, a newspaper clipping. I picked it up. The headline read, "Unidentified woman found dead on Route 666 shoulder. No witnesses." The photo beneath it was black and white, but I recognized the curve of the road in the background. I had driven past that spot 100 times, maybe more. My chest tightened. The article mentioned a driver spotted a figure near the road but didn't stop. The timestamp on the report was the same date I'd driven that route last summer. I had seen something then. A shape in the dark. I told myself it was a shadow or a trick of the headlights. And I kept going. I always kept going. Suddenly, the driver's seat wasn't empty anymore. A shadow filled it. Not with movement, but with presence. No details. Just darkness in the shape of a man sitting still, watching me without eyes. I stepped back. The rig's headlights snapped on without warning, blinding me in the pitch black. I stumbled, heart racing, and ran back to my truck. As I threw it into gear, the radio clicked on one last time. No voice, just breathing. But it wasn't angry or threatening. It was slow, controlled, like someone watching me and waiting. I pulled back onto the road, The black rig now behind me again, headlights dimmed but always visible. It followed from a distance, never closing, never vanishing. Just there, like it was escorting me somewhere. And I think I finally knew where. I drove without speaking, without thinking, just letting the road take me where it wanted. The black rig trailed behind me like a shadow that had always been there, only now I could finally see it. The highway stretched endlessly, the same cracks in the pavement repeating like a broken record, and the clock on my dash stayed frozen at 1:17 a.m. But I knew I wasn't stuck anymore. Not really. I had seen too much, remembered too clearly, and the road somehow knew I understood. Up ahead, a curve in the highway I didn't recognize appeared through the haze. A rusted mile marker stood next to a patch of scorched gravel. I slowed to a stop, heart pounding because I knew this was the place. I stepped out, left the engine idling, and walked toward the shoulder. There was nothing there now. Just dirt, sand, and heat rising from the ground, but I felt it. The heaviness, the memory embedded in the silence. I knelt and pressed my hand to the earth. It was cold, unnaturally cold. A gust of wind swept across the desert, and with it came a sound that didn't belong. A voice, faint, almost a whisper. "You saw me." I turned and she was there again. The same woman, same hollow expression, same stillness like she wasn't really made of flesh. This time I didn't ask questions. I didn't run. I looked her in the eyes and said, "I'm sorry." She stared back, unmoving, unreadable, and then slowly, almost gently, she nodded once. Her shape began to fade into the morning light that had just started to break across the horizon, and as the first rays of sun hit the blacktop, she disappeared. When I got back into my truck, the dash clock rolled forward. 1:18 a.m. My phone pinged. One missed call from dispatch. Radio came alive with regular chatter, weather updates, jokes, drivers calling in way stations. I checked my GPS. The dot was moving again. I didn't see the black rig in my mirrors anymore. I don't think I ever will again. I made my delivery in Farmington without incident. Didn't talk about what happened. Didn't try to explain it. But I stopped ignoring things after that. I pay attention now. I stop when I see someone on the shoulder. I answer every call, no matter how strange it sounds. I don't assume anymore that it's someone else's problem, because I know now that the road remembers. And sometimes it gives you one last chance to do the right thing.